This week's show brought to you by my 100 IV Vaporeon. Suck it. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade have new homes and will probably make the finals, right? Right? We'll remind you about Trump's fighting with the NFL in the past and whatever else sports are fancy. I'm your host, Ray Alvarez, a.k.a. Nerd Numbers. Co-host back with us, Patrick Minton, who you can find on Twitter as NBA Geek. Patrick, what is your favorite type of meat and meat sauce?
My favorite type of meat is a ribeye steak. And my favorite type of meat sauce, well, it's hard to say. I think salt and pepper if you're going steak, but if you're going anything else, then definitely like a dry rub barbecue.
Let me ask, on steak, do you go for are you okay with steak sauce? Or are you more of a, it sounded like you're a pure person there where you don't go for steak sauce.
I'm a purist. I will occasionally do like a demi-glace or like a gorgonzola bechamel kind of thing. But mostly I like salt and pepper, maybe a little bit of rosemary, nothing too fancy.
Oh, yeah. So we may...
If you can't tell, I make a lot of meat.
Oh, yeah. Well, we gave that chat a few weeks ago, and I'm like, maybe we'll do a fourth or fifth podcast. We might be up to 2, which we'll talk in a bit. So maybe we can do like Patrick's advice on meat. We are produced, as always, by our voice of God, our man of many hats, Brian Foster. Brian, say hey.
How's it going? I love it. And yeah, Patrick, you just get your hair like twice as crazy. You could be the next Guy Fieri. This is awesome. Let's do it.
Are you saying it's crazy now and I need to go for twice as crazy?
Well, I'm just saying it takes a lot of work to be a TV chef.
You've got to look like a in Super Saiyan mode. And I
exactly.
believe it's a made-up name, so it's not his original name, but he pronounces it weird. There's a whole bubble. But anyway.
Fieri, yeah. He's from Santa Rosa. Great guy.
Stop talking food and stuff. And I actually do want to give a preemptive just to explain that. I'm a Pokemon Go player. I actually did catch 100 IV. That means maxed out Vaporeon this week. And then I learned a trick to take it over the limit. So I may include that in these show notes. I'm very psyched. All right. So, for a show that has for years talked about how Carmelo Anthony is overrated, I could not be happier about this news because Carmelo Anthony is headed to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And what I feel is really important about this trade is that it was for Enes Kanter, who was quite a good player. If you looked at Enes Kanter's numbers, he scores like 60% true shooting. He rebounds at a very high rate. The only real ding I've heard people bring against him, and this has been this has been a weird one that I don't agree with. I'd be curious in your opinions, Patrick. I've heard people say he's not a good defender. And then a few years ago, when they had the Thunder, the Warriors on the ropes in the playoffs, people said, well, he's not a good defender, but if you play him next to Steven Adams, their synergy is good at defense. So I said, whatever. But if you were going to bash Enes Kanter for defense, the player you don't bring in is Carmelo Anthony. And I remember there was a really bad political cartoon when he played in the Olympics for the second or third time with Coach K, where Coach K said defense on a whiteboard, and the Carmelo avatar said something like, "Man, I didn't know we had to learn new languages to play in the Olympics." So Carmelo Anthony is not known for his defense, is all I'm saying. So this trade makes me laugh, and I feel makes the Thunder worse. So I'm curious on your opinions there, Patrick. First off, if you think the Kanter's defense has any merit, and then, of course, if you disagree with me that Melo to the Thunder is a downgrade.
I think Melo is a downgrade, but we've been bitten hard by these things in the past where a clearly bad player suddenly plays totally differently on a new team. We could see it happen. I agree with you about Kanter on defense. I'm super suspicious of anyone who isn't a real coach and who's coached at a high level. I'm super suspicious of their evaluation of any given player's defense. You can do there's so much cherry picking of film of situations where players look bad, and given the athletes in the NBA, it's just super easy to make anyone look bad. if you just watch enough. I think what most people do when they evaluate defense is they only focus on like one thing. They focus on like how it's usually on ball defense, right? Which is only a very small fraction of team defense. I personally don't have a strong opinion about a Cantor's defense because I haven't watched a lot of it, but the other thing to keep in mind is like how bad does someone have to be on defense to counteract how good they are in other areas?
Because Cantor he's a very efficient scorer, better than Melo has ever been. And actually, that was what's interesting. Brian, if you don't have this up, if you bring up the player comparison engine, if you go to Boxscore Geeks, it's the top tab. If you click on the tools tab, it'll take you to the player comparison engine. If you compare Enes Kanter and Carmelo Anthony last season, what actually shows up is on a per minute basis, Enes Kanter is actually not only a more efficient scorer, a higher. I don't want to say the word volume. Like he scores more points per minute than Melo, and actually that's
usage, maybe. Dre, no, just kidding.
He's not a higher usage because he's more efficient. That's the
right.
Key. What's fascinating to me is the Thunder. What they did last season is they basically did a power forward by committee. They did Enes Kanter. I'm going to mess up his first name, so I'm not going to try, but I'm going to say D. Sabonis, the Sabonis kid.
Yeah.
And Taj Gibson, Taj Gibson got a $14 million contract on Minnesota, Patrick, after his performance last season, which was bad. Yeah. Okay, sorry. But anyway, so yeah, they basically.
I just hate this whole I'm going to get the band back together strategy for basketball management, but whatever. Let's move on.
All right, but so they basically did a rule by committee. So those three players all started at various points in the season, and then they all played about 21 minutes a game. And so essentially, if the Thunder had just played Kanter 30 minutes a game and not played Sabonis, they would have looked a lot better. But if you look at Kanter, like if Kanter had played full minutes, he would have looked better than Melo on a scoring basis. And what was interesting to me is I had two notes. One was you can't put Kanter in critical points of the game. I've always hated this narrative. That was true of Shaq, right? Because you could just do hackish. And yet somehow they were still able to win 3 titles despite that glaring liability. And second, they said like he was a bench player like Greg Monroe and should only be played off the bench for 28 minutes. My thinking there is if you play 28 minutes, you're already overlapping with starters. Starters play 30-plus minutes. So why don't you even if you're going to argue they're an off-the-bench player, why don't you up them to 30 to 35 minutes and just turn them into a Manu Ginobili, Lamar Odom-esque player? So losing Enes Kanter, I think, really hurts. I think it's going to be hidden a little because they also lost Sabonis in the Paul George trade.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what the updated over-under is on that one. I want to go the under, I think. But sometimes I'm surprised that sometimes Vegas is actually pretty clever about this because so here's an over-under number that I don't want to touch is like 50 wins. Because it's like, the Thunder were, 44 wins or something last year, and you get a couple of sort of out of the ordinary performances. Maybe Paul George is better at small forward, and boom, you're suddenly right there at that 50-win mark, right?
They still have Oladipo, like he could finally get there.
Yeah, there's just a lot of ways you could see this team winning 50 games, right?
So I will say I got into some arguments on Twitter about Carmelo Anthony sucking. And it turns out the one person that can stop me from arguing Carmelo Anthony is my son. So I was like 3/4 of the way through an article on this, so I've done a lot of research. The new starting 5, the 3 that stay the same are Russell Westbrook, who has been a 17 wins produced player the last 2 seasons. That was with Kevin Durant, without. So I'm very encouraged, and he's in his prime. So I'm not worried about Russell Westbrook at this point. I could have called 2 seasons ago an outlier. He's done it 2 years in a row. I'm fine saying thank you, like you were saying, Patrick, the bitten us in the ass before. You're right. I called you overrated and an average player, and you were overrated and an average player 5 seasons ago, but since then you have turned into a star. Russell Westbrook, you're a star. MVP caliber player. No problems with you as MVP. Go with God. Then there's Andre Roberson, who is fascinating. He is the definition of a role player. He's a player I don't want touching the ball ever, to shoot.
That's a good thing he plays with Russell Westbrook then.
But exactly, he has made stealing and blocking and rebounding, and so he's everything else, right? And so I mean that you could.
He's basically what Thabo Sefolosha was, right?
He's an Thabo Sefolosha-like character, and he's perfect for this team because he's a player that doesn't need to shoot, and you can't convince me they're going to have any problems with floor stretch between Adams, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook. I'm not including Melo. Now, the real issue is Melo is actually a downgrade from Victor Oladipo, who you brought up, Brian. Oladipo wasn't good. Oladipo was a pretty bad scorer. Melo is actually a downgrade from that. Paul George, we've seen him at power forward in the past. I'm curious to see who's going to get it, but basically, if you played small ball with Melo and Paul George has shown he can at least be an average power forward. I'm questioning if he's ever going to return to his star form from before his injury. And then Steven Adams is young. So the basic point I have is to what you're saying, Patrick. I think Andre Roberson and Steven Adams are both young and improving. And so if Paul George basically replaces the combination of Cantor plus Sabonis, because Cantor was amazing, but Sabonis was horrible, so they kind of canceled each other out. Right. If Paul George is an upgrade from that, and Melo kind of holds firm with Victor Oladipo, and you have two players improved, then yes, to your exact point, this team.
I could imagine a scenario where Melo has a better year than he did, the last couple of years in Oklahoma City, because it's really hard to say like how much of Melo's terrible ball stopping offensive tendencies were because he felt some need to do that with their limited, with his teammates that had limited offensive skills, and or everybody just kind of hating the triangle, and then when he gets the ball, not really knowing what to do with the triangle, etc. I mean, the thing about Melo that's infuriating, and I think a lot of us know this type of player from their own teams, is there are so many times where he will get a ball, like say behind the 3-point line, he's open for a shot, but doesn't take the shot and just grabs the ball and waits for his man to close out on him. And it's like now he wants to start initiating some offensive move, right? It's almost like he's like, well, if it's open, it's not worthy of me taking it. That's not hard enough. I have to take a more difficult shot because that's cooler. It's just kind of that's what I really mean when we call him a ball stopper. And it's just like, it's so frustrating. Like, I wouldn't mind if he took more shots, if he would just take those shots where, okay, I worked really hard. Like, I could see Russell Westbrook doing this. I worked really hard to set you up. I dribbled for like 10 seconds and drew 3 guys on me, and I set you up. Now take the fucking shot. Don't just stand there and hold the ball and wait for your defender to close out on you.
Well, and I mean, the other side, so I agree with your point. In a new offense, it's different. The Knicks were pretty terrible. And, for instance, like everybody, like, he had Kristaps Porzingis. Porzingis was horrible, too. The only issues I kind of have is he's over 30. He's kind of been stalled for the last 3 seasons. So I do agree that there is a good chance things change just because of a new system. But I also think one thing that is just baffling, and I think this will be the last word and I'll lead us into our next topic, is, he's over 30 and not what he was. Mm-hmm. And underestimate that in regards to players, which brings us to Dwayne Wade got bought out by Chicago and is re-signing with LeBron, I'll phrase it that way, to play in Cleveland for like 2.7. He left $7 million on the table, I believe, which is like, this is the second time now in his career that he has left money on the table to try and play with LeBron. He left $9 million on the table when he opted out of his contract to hopefully re-sign in Miami with LeBron, which didn't happen. He's now left $7 million on the table to play with LeBron in Cleveland, although I view this as a much smarter move because he's not getting to the playoffs with Chicago next season. If he makes it to the playoffs this season, has one good series, that's easily a $10 million contract, $10 million a year contract.
I think it's pretty clear that this, the $7 million he sacrificed this year is like it wasn't the smart business move, but it's smart for his own. Like, if he played hardball and said, no, I'm not going to accept the buyout of that much, like, you're going to have to pay me more, like, $18 million to buy me out so I don't lose money. If he had done that, then Chicago would have just been like, okay, fine, we'll just keep you. And then he would have just been less happy, right, for 3-4 months, right? And so his is basically sacrificing money for happiness, which is, when somebody has as much money as he does, is usually the smart move to make.
And I like I said, I can see this as just a smart gamble where he's saying, I'm leaving some money on the table. But like I said, this has happened to so many players, right? You have one good playoff series. This used to be the Knicks' MO. I can't remember the players because it's been forever. But like Isaiah Thomas used to would look for the playoffs for a guy that had one good playoff season, go like, I'm going to give you $7 million a year. And they were never good again. And any statistician could go, it is perfectly within the realm of possibility that an average player or a below average player plays 4 to 5 games above average. Yeah. Don't let that be your thing. So I think you're right where it's, first off, would he rather play next to LeBron in Cleveland and have another title run before he retires? Or would he rather be in Chicago where they're not going to make the playoffs and he might even get benched? I think he made the right call there. And then I also think so it's great. It's amusing.
I think he could have also gotten more money with another team that would not have given him the starting job. So I think in this case, he chose Cleveland because they're willing to start him. Whereas I could totally see some other teams willing to give him 5, 6, 7 million, but not give him the starting role. Have a valuable veteran off the bench. So,
and this one gets really interesting too, because I think what you put this on the script, Brian, so correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only heard this, I haven't read officially. I was just talking to some friends around the water cooler today. But because Isaiah Thomas is going to be injured through at least January, and obviously I really hope they don't try and bring him back fast. Like you want Isaiah Thomas healthy for the playoffs. He's going to be the starting point guard, is what they're planning on doing, which I don't hate. Some background information. When I first started automating a lot of the Wins Produced stuff for Dave Barry, Basketball Reference didn't used to have broken down position point guard, shooting guard, small forward. They just said guard, forward, center. And so what I did initially before Dave just handed me a bunch of his positions and I plugged those into my algorithm and have since found places to scrape specific positions, I just said, I'll look for the highest assistant, a point guard, and I'll assign them the point guard role and then do the rest of the automation. Dwayne Wade kept showing up as a point guard in his prime, which isn't surprising. And then like Michael Jordan would be the same boat. I think Dwayne Wade, Michael Jordan are
pretty sure he was actually officially the point guard his first couple of years, wasn't he?
Dwayne Wade probably so, and Michael Jordan actually was 1 year as well. So it's not surprising they both have point guard skills. So I think Dwayne Wade, his issue the last couple seasons, I think he was a very athletic drive to the hoop player, very much like Derrick Rose. He's not as good at that anymore, just from banged upness. So if he's a distributor, I think that could actually work out really well. And being a distributor, with LeBron James, Jay Crowder, Tristan Thompson's really good close to the hoop. I don't really have a complaint with that. Although this Cleveland team is really old, and for all the excitement people are giving Melo and Wade, it is shocking how many people don't realize that every player except LeBron James from the 2003 draft is a shell of their former selves, retired, or just never turned into anything anyway.
14 years ago, that's not very long.
Chris Paul's in that draft class too, though, isn't he?
No, Paul was in a 2003 draft. That would make that the most insane. I would actually have to start giving some credence to the stupid.
What was he, 4 then, or 5?
He's close. I think he was picked. Yeah, he was picked.
I mean, we commonly refer to that as the most insane draft.
He was the 4th pick in the 2005 draft.
Huh. So that's 2 years later. But I mean, he's getting up there in age too. I mean, it is.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm not arguing. Yeah, and I think Paul was a junior, right?
I think he did 3 years.
Mm-hmm. So from an age perspective, he might be pretty similar to some of those guys in the 2003 draft that were.
Wade did 3 years as well, I believe, at Marquette. Melo was a freshman, and LeBron,
Wade might have done 4 years, but it could have been 3. Yeah, he definitely did not come out early.
Yeah, he did. He might have done all 4. That'd be interesting. And then, of course, LeBron James is a high schooler. So, and by the way, I've written on this before. I might link it in the show notes. LeBron James is ridiculous with how many minutes he's played, and even more so crazy is he's aged like wine in the finals. He played his best finals performance ever last season. So I keep with all these players that I'm pointing at age, I keep waiting for Bron to break down. So I give a lot of credence to what you said at the very top of this, Patrick. It's very easy one of these players bites us in the ass because I'm saying, come on, they're old, and maybe they forget.
Yeah, I think looking back in history, you have to put LeBron in that category with Wilt and other players who just put in monumental minutes, right, and did so for a really long time.
Yeah, Wilt was pretty absurd because, I think he did average over 48 minutes a season.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is the record. Like, people say this all the time, but I think that's the record we're never going to see broken, just because, no coach is going to want a player to play that much. Like, even if a player could do it, they wouldn't let them.
Will also played other sports, kind of in the off season when he was playing in the NBA. He was ridiculous.
Yeah, but I forget which season it was, but he averaged like 48 and a half minutes.
Yep,
because of overtimes. He literally just always played. He'd never, ever, ever, ever sat.
Why would you sit him?
Yeah, no, but I mean, like, that's the thing is, like, you could say the same thing about LeBron. It's like, why would I ever sit LeBron? It's because maybe having him in the finals would be
exactly.
Less mileage would be useful, and you could totally make an argument that maybe they would have won a title if Wilt had averaged 40 minutes instead of 48. But I mean, we're never going to see that record broken, right?
Dre, for both of these trades, I kind of felt the same way. So, we talked about just what they mean for basketball, right? Cleveland has a bunch of kind of guards in their 30s, and Wade might end up being the best of them, and he may not. Carmelo Anthony, power forward's probably a disaster, but they have George as a small forward. He's a big small forward and can rebound a little bit. I think overall, like, both of these deals are not going to move the needle in the basketball sense at all. It's clear the Rockets and the Warriors are still the favorites, and the Cavs are as well, but Wade doesn't matter to them very much, and the Spurs.
The Spurs out.
Right, so no, I'm just trying. Well, you're right, but the point is, I don't think these deals matter at all. But then the narrative is really interesting because that's what we're saying, right? But then the mainstream is saying, well, we got some new super teams on the block, boys. OKC is the next new team, and we think they're going to crash and burn. So it's going to be fun to follow that and see how it goes. And one more thing on Cantor. If you remember, he criticized Kevin Durant's fake Twitter accounts a few days before that, and he's like, I'm Mr. OKC and all that, and he should, I was hurt by those comments. And then a couple days later, we're trading you, Cantor. Get out of here. So that's how the NBA goes, right?
That is, I mean, there was not really any way to talk about Isaiah Thomas. It didn't matter. It's kind of, we're hoping he comes back healthy because that team looks really good if he's healthy. But yeah, when Isaiah Thomas came out, it was like, you're sitting here yelling at Durant for making his move, but how often does it happen? So I think that is a great follow-up. I'm gonna have to remember that. Where Cantor was like you just said, he basically came out to blast Kevin Durant, and they were like, we will trade you in a heartbeat for a player worse than you because we want to make people think we're good. And yes, to your last point, the big three comparisons, it is so funny that anybody would you take Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green. So I think respectively, right, you have MVP, two-time MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. Is that right for all three of those guys?
Correct.
You take those three players as your big three. Don't even think of Klay Thompson, the second best three-point shooter ever behind Curry. Don't think of Andre Iguodala, Finals MVP, should have been Sixth Man of the Year. Don't think of the rest of that team. Don't think of Nick Young, the
Steve Kerr said he needs to shoot more in practice. He's not shooting enough, apparently.
God, okay. So don't think of that. And you compare those big three to any, Westbrook, George, Melo, any of the other big threes, and it is hilarious that anybody thinks they stack up. It is hilarious.
Yeah, that's right.
The one last thing I'm excited about in Cleveland is I'm excited to see what happens with Kevin Love. There's some analysis to be done there. He was not a good pairing with Irving, and I think the Cavaliers may improve just in lieu of Kevin Love being utilized better.
I forgot.
Definitely something to keep your eye on. Yeah, he always seemed to have really great synergy with LeBron. He seems to know where to go to get the passes that LeBron wants to deliver. I think Irving's absence is going to. I think it's definitely going to improve his raw numbers. Whether or not it improves his per minute performance, I think that's a open question. But I think it'll improve his raw numbers for sure.
Someone asked LeBron today if Wade's going to start throwing lobs to him again like the old days, and he said, "Well, I still have the athleticism, and I think he still has the passing." So we'll see if that happens, LeBron.
I do not have a smooth transition to this, and you were gonna. I think you said you called it U-Bum because I think was that the 30 for 30.
U-bum was the quote from LeBron James. That's easy for you to say. No, but James's tweet said "U-bum." That's literally the words of the tweet.
When he tweeted at Trump for all of the kneeling hubbubaloo, and I don't want to denigrate that at all. We, just so you're clear, if there was any question of our audience, we are fully on board behind peacefully protesting police brutality by kneeling at the national anthem, which has no effing business being in sports. If you're going to say, I don't want any politics in my sport, then stop letting your cities fund them. That's politics. Stop letting the military pay them to actually be pro-military. That's why you see, like, I went to the Packers game this last weekend. We didn't get in time to see it because we were like, had a diaper bag and all that with the kid. But there was a flyover because the military pays for like things like that. Don't have the national anthem. Like if you're one of those people that says keep politics out of sports, hate to tell you this, hate to burst your bubble. Santa Claus isn't real. Neither is the Easter Bunny. Neither is the Tooth Fairy. And politics has been injected into sports from the beginning. It's gotten even worse. So you're living in a fairy tale land if you don't think they're connected, and you're living in a fairy tale land if you don't think you have the right to exercise your freedom of speech in the way that players in the NFL have done. So, but Trump went on a tirade against that. He called them sons of bitches and that they should be fired for this. Has gotten some great backlash from players, including LeBron.
Name a job where you wouldn't get fired for calling people sons of bitches.
Well, I mean, there are plenty of...
I mean, why is that okay?
Well, again, and it gets even worse. This has been brought up many, many times. I've seen these memes floating around. It's true. When there were legitimate Klansmen and anti-Semitic people marching with torches, and they just wanted Trump to say, that is not okay. I'll give a brief parallel, which shows the right way. We're big fans of Rick and Morty on this show, or at least me and Brian are. The sad part, Dan Harmon seems, at least in some of his storytelling, in terms of his writer's room, in terms of who he hires, seems somewhat progressive. Turns out a lot of the fans of Adult Swim are very much the alpha males that like video games, so they're very misogynistic. They've been misogynistic this last season against some of Rick and Morty's writers, against some of the themes. Dan Harmon just got up and said, I'm not cool with the fans of my shows being misogynistic assholes. Again, it's really hard to control your audience sometimes. It's not even necessarily in the creator's ability to do so. But if you just ask a creator or a leader to at least get up and say, I understand that some of the people following me feel this way, that's not okay. People have asked Trump to do that about neo-Nazis, alt-right people, anti-Semitic people, and he refuses to because, obviously, he's okay with them. Let's just be clear there. So that's the point. He would not condemn that, but he will condemn Kaepernick, and many people bring that up. So exactly what you're saying, like the sons of bitches comment, it gets even worse when you can't even get him to just say, hey, it's not okay for Nazis to march with torches.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'll get in here, Dre. So, yeah, I mean, there's been so many good, a lot of good political talk all over media. That's great. So what I did is I tried to focus on the sports and the economics reactions to this, and kind of that criticism angle that we go to. So my favorite rant in that area was Shannon Sharp, who basically said, everything that the NFL's gone through, CT, domestic violence, whatever, you name it, the owners never stood up for any of that. But then all of a sudden, when another rich guy attacks them, which is Trump, then they get all defensive and they band together. So they don't really care about what the athletes are actually protesting, police violence, specifically against black people. They just really care because their buddy Trump came after them. And, it's true. There's a lot of hypocrisy there. And then the second part of it is there's an excellent blog post by Jeff Pearlman, longtime sports author, about Trump's history in the USFL and the NFL. And basically he tanked the USFL to try to become an owner in the NFL and made everyone mad and was gone from football because of that. That's the short of it. I guess he's writing a book about the USFL, and this is an excerpt. It's an upcoming book. So the reason why I say all this is, Trump is reacting to the NFL for a reason because he has a long history with it, and the owners are reacting to him for a specific reason. And none of it has to do with the protests or anything like that. It's just about their own bullshit. So, yeah, Shannon Sharp is right. There's a lot of hypocrisy here.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that is, we've seen this with Trump, and I wish people would stop believing it's more complicated than this. I believe one of you two retweeted some 538 stuff about this, either you, Patrick, or you, Brian, where he just said, Trump is just basically an easily triggered narcissist who gets upset and just kind of follows that. And we know that he's had a feud with the NFL in the past, and he's just, basically doing that again. And we've seen him do that again, right? When he's targeted various people that he's angry at. And on the one hand, I agree with you, Brian, where it is depressing that the owners aren't doing it for the right reason. It is at least encouraging that there is some pushback, especially.
Yeah, even if it's the wrong reason, we need all the help we can get, right?
And what I will say is, can we at least put an end to everybody who's talked about Kaepernick and like he could have done it better and it wasn't achieving its goal? Like, clearly Kaepernick has gotten a message that has gotten so big and at least done something. So I'm getting really sick of the Kaepernick didn't do anything with his kneeling. We can at least put that. You also link we're almost out of time on you, Patrick, so I'm going to say this and I'll let you get the last word. Popovich is the best. I wish Popovich would run for president, where he gave a talk about privilege and racism in the United States, which is just poetry. And he has talked against Trump many, many times. Popovich, you can say a lot of things about him, but at least when it comes to politics and the stuff he says, God bless him.
I would encourage you to read. Actually, it's my shout out, so I shouldn't be saying this already, but I'd encourage you to read the Kevin Arnovitz article on Popovich and why he shouldn't run for president, because I don't think he would do well at all, actually. But just he's an intensely private person, and politicians who just basically, imagine a politician who treated most reporters like the way Pop treated sideline reporters in the NBA, and you can see that wouldn't get voters really engaged and excited. It's tempting to think that he'd just slay everyone with his sharp wit, like kind of in a Joe Biden kind of way, but I don't think he'd actually be like that in the media most of the time. Nevertheless, I agree with you. I think he's one of the smartest and admirable men in the NBA right now.
Well, I was going to say, you were saying stealing your shoutouts. We're at almost 7:30.
We are at shoutouts.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
That's my shoutout then.
Yeah, I was
going to read Kevin Arnovitz on Pop.
All right, so actually, I'll do mine, and yeah, this will be our show then. So sorry, I know it's most smooth transition. So for those of you that noticed, there was a new segment that we're hoping to make a weekly segment on the show. That's 2 podcasts for you. 2. We did Q&A with Professor David Barry, and so Dave has been hired by Forbes to basically write a weekly column, and I basically made the offer. I keep saying basically. I noticed I do that, so apologies. So I made the offer to him. I said, if you want to come on and just talk 20 minutes about your article, any follow-up questions, we'll do it. So he's got a new one up this week talking about the NBA. We talked about this on last week's show, losing money in their report. He does note that despite the fact that the leaked report turned into a story, we don't get to see the specifics, so we don't necessarily get to follow up. And then there's a famous quote that I am missing, I believe, from a former Toronto Blue Jays executive that said, I can take a $4 million profit and turn it into a $2 million loss, and every reputable accountant in the country will agree with me. It's a famous quote, so I don't remember who, so I apologize for that. But he was talking about the NBA losing money. So that's his article this week. We're going to have another Q&A with him this weekend. So if you have questions for Dave Barry about his article, about upcoming articles, you can put them in the comment sections below on this post. And depending on if we like your comments, etc., that'll go into our Monday segment. That'll be Q&A with Professor David Barry, which, as I mentioned, is a normal thing. And I keep forgetting if I'm going to call him Dave or David, is what it is. So yeah, we've got 2 shout-outs. Brian, last one, then we can head out of here.
Yeah, so I guess just real fast to finish up on the U-Bum stuff. My favorite tweet was from your old buddy Patrick T.D. Williams at Trill Harmonic, who said that that LeBron showed restraint in calling the president a bum and could have gone much worse.
Of course, yeah.
So that was pretty funny. And then, of course, there is a U-Bum shirt with LeBron dunking on Donald Trump, and I thought that was pretty funny. There was just something about the LeBron's tweet that I really liked. Bum is such an old school insult. It's very simple and straightforward, but I just thought it was so appropriate here. Trump is acting like a bum, so I really like that. Quick esports shout out, because we got to keep that rolling to keep our Twitch credibility. SoCal Regionals was last weekend. Shout out to everyone there. It was the first tournament with the new Marvel game, which had just come out a few days before, and everyone's saying it's the best Marvel game ever by far. So that was really hype. I won't even say who won, but check it out. Get us out of here, Dre.
Okay, actually, I apologize. I have one more shout out. It's to Jacob Goldstein, who you can find on Twitter as Jacob E. Goldstein. I'll make sure to include a link in the show notes. And I can't find the tweet quickly. I apologize because I've tweeted so much about Melo. But he noted that if you looked at Melo's shots on wide open shots for the last couple of seasons and compared that to his normal things, he was only better by like 0.6%. So basically, if your argument is Melo hasn't been shooting well because of bad distribution, he has been shooting bad on wide open shots. So I loved it. Another Melo pass. So again, I'll give Patrick credit. We'll see what happens. We'll probably get proven wrong. But Jacob Goldstein on Twitter, fantastic follower if you're looking for someone who hates Melo, or at least uses statistics to show why Melo may be hated. I don't necessarily say hate, because we've actually said we like Melo, but fantastic follow. So sorry for the last shout out. We have been the Boxscore Geek Show. You can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. You can find the show on iTunes and Stitcher as the Boxscore Geek Show. Subscribe and upload. I'm actually going to do a little pleading here. We are on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. We currently use Skype and Twitch to live broadcast, but if we can get 100 followers on YouTube, it'll actually really, really help out for things like custom URLs if we want to try and use Google Hangouts to talk, which is what we use for Dave Barry. So if you haven't followed us on YouTube, that's channel Nerd Numbers. Please follow. It helps us out. I don't want to turn into that channel, but the only reason I'm going to do it this week is because 100 is a special number. We're at like 81. We get to 100. That really helps us out. You can follow us on twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. We're going to be going live every week around, I'm going to say around because we're a little late this week, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. I've been your host, Dre Alvarez, Nerd Numbers on Twitter. Co-host Patrick Minton, NBA Geek on Twitter. Produced by Brian Foster, Boxscore Brian on Twitter. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.